Welcome to the Fit Dads podcast. I'm Brad Thompson. I'm joined by Ryan Dutton. Big one today, Ryan. We've had the absolutely amazing Ollie Newton.
Legend, absolute legend. I've really loved today's talk, and we mentioned it on our stories. We put some out on social media recently about we wanted to do this podcast about mental health and especially men's mental health for a while now. And Ollie talked today about some things that I didn't even know were associated with mental health, and to hear how his journey stemmed from something very small, a flippant comment from a friend, into something that changed the next 10 years of his life was just blew my mind. It really did.
What he's doing now, and I think I sort of summarised this episode towards the end where I sort of say his weaknesses have become his strengths, and there's him self-imposed weaknesses that he's put on himself that have probably stemmed from, I suppose, understanding himself a little bit more. Like you said about the certain issues that cropped up for him, quite a flippant remark that turned his life around, but I just found him absolutely mesmerising to talk to.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have done another hour just talking away at him, and we've said instantly, look, let's have you back on because he's got so much more to say. But he is his page Run for Your Mind is just incredible.
To think about how many people he's actually helped as well so far. From he actually did something called 100. What's it called?
100 Talks for Change.
100 Talks for Change, where they went round to 100 different schools and gave 100 talks.
In 20 days.
So 100 schools, 100 talks within 20 days. I mean, that in itself is just like what that does to your fatigue levels, and the commitment to make change there is phenomenal. But he summed it up really well at the end. He said that little stint of 20 days put them on the map in terms of their credibility and who they are and the levels that they're willing to go to make change, because I can imagine it's quite difficult as well. There's a lot of people talking about this now, and if you're not in the mainstream or if you're not kind of some kind of celebrity, then people don't always take you as seriously because they're not as invested in your journey. But honestly, if you listen to today's episode, you will be endeared to Ollie in a way that you probably haven't ever been with anyone before, because he's so open, so raw. He understands every aspect of his journey, and he can pinpoint in detail where the pitfalls were, where he went wrong, and how he's managed to change those. So I just think it's going to be so insightful if you've got any kind of mental health issues, or you're going through some anxiety or OCD, or you've got kids that are going through something similar. This is going to be phenomenal for you. I'm really glad you said that. He drops a little resource in there that I honestly think could be absolutely game-changing for any parents of any kids who maybe there's a spectre of, I think he called it neurodivergent learning. Yep. Honestly, I'm absolutely mesmerised. And EBT, he called it. He says he touched on how CBT can actually be quite damaging to certain levels of OCD. Yep. But it's EBT, and there's a book right at the end that he recommends. So I think you're gonna love it. Mate, inspirational dad, inspirational husband. He's unbelievable. Great story. Guys, this is the episode. Enjoy. And if you've got any questions, reach out to Ollie, because he's really up for kind of helping people off the back of this. So 100%. Please share this with someone who you think could really appreciate it, and someone who would get loads of value. And as always, mate, we're just going to encourage the people to subscribe, to leave a rating and review. We'd love that. We want this message to spread far and wide, because Ollie deserves it, 100%. He deserves it, but we deserve it as well. Yeah, there is that. Let's be honest. Self-love. It helps the podcast out more than you know, and if you enjoy it, share it with people, get them to subscribe, and we can get even bigger, better guests on that are going to help people in more kind of diverse ways. Should we get into it? Let's go for it. Let's do it. Ollie Newton, thank you for joining us, mate. Really grateful for you giving up your time and sitting down with us.
It's great to be here. I appreciate it. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to it. We put a little story at us, didn't we? Just say that we wanted to do a podcast like this for ages. Someone who is really in the know when it comes to mental health and can give us some great insights into, someone who's been through, I'm sure, some pretty traumatic stuff, and now helps other people in the community, small and big, basically. You've been telling us a few of your accolades a second ago. So let's go right back to the start. When was it that you started to experience some mental health issues? When did you realise it was becoming a bit more of an issue personally?
I was about 6 or 7 years old. In fact, I was 6, nearly 7 years old. I remember actually the day that I knew I was a little bit different. I was on holiday in Menorca with my family. We'd been out for a meal. And I was walking down the street with my mum, dad, sister and my brother. I touched this lamppost with my right hand and I carried on walking. And then after about 100 metres down the road, I just had this
this overwhelming fear. If I didn't go back and touch the lamppost, I thought something bad was going to happen to one of my family members, like someone was going to die. So I ran back as fast as I could, touched the lamppost, and I remember my dad was actually chasing me, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I touched it, and I got there just in time. And I honestly believe back then that by completing that one little act that I'd saved everyone's life. But little did I know back then that was going to be the beginning of something that was going to be, you know, quite difficult through my childhood. And I'm always really clear on, you know, with my childhood, I was really, really lucky. I had great family, great people around me. I was fortunate about, you know, where I lived and where I grew up, and everything was great. But these little things like really started to creep into like my day-to-day life really quickly. I remember I'd seen a film on monsters when I was like 7, and I was like, I had this fear that there was a monster in my cupboard. So I started off to doing these little checks in my bedroom, and it started off by, I had a wardrobe on my window, and I checked behind the curtains, and I'd check in the wardrobes, check behind the curtain, check this little box at the bottom of my bed, and I'd get into bed and everything would be okay. But then as like time went on, I started to make little mistakes, and if I made a mistake, then I'd have to build a further ritual into the following night's routine. And then within a matter of maybe 2 or 3 months, I was doing 40, 50 checks in my room. It was taking me an hour and a half to get into bed. My dad, bless him, he put laminate flooring under on my floor in my bedroom, and he was in the bedroom underneath me, so he'd be like banging on the ceiling like, "What are you doing?" after like, you know, 45 minutes of me running around my room. And I couldn't explain it to him because it sort of all reverted back to that same thing, the fear of someone dying if I didn't do these things. Yeah,
was it the same age, around 6, 7 years old?
7, yeah. So that was, you know, that was the next stage from that holiday, that, you know, where things really started to creep in, and on top of things like stepping on grates, you know, touching lampposts. I had no idea what was going on there at the time.
It's funny that, because my missus, and she doesn't do as much anymore, but when I first met her, I told you this story.
No.
She used to like flick the light switch on and off.
Yeah.
And I used to know it because I'd be in the gym downstairs and I could hear the switch going. And I'll go in there, she stood there, and the lights going on and off, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" She'd be like, startled. "Oh, I'm just making sure they're all right." I'm like, "That's weird." When it happens like 4 or 5 times. Like,
so that was a big one for me, flicking the light switches.
I was like, Amy, what's going on here? She goes, and I sat her down and she said, "I'm just worried that if I don't do it a certain amount of times," and she used to do it with the door handles, I'll slam the door handle, make sure everything was double checked. So I've got this real fear that like my dad will die if I don't do it a certain amount of times. If I don't do it in the right way, I don't flick it in the right way, I feel like my dad will die. And that was the first moment I was like, "Oh, there's something not quite right here." She doesn't do it anymore. I think she was probably quite stressed out at the time, and she probably does it more when she's stressed. But this probably would have been more foreign to me, what you say, if it hadn't been for my own missus.
Well, there you go. I did see you looking at me. I thought he either can relate to it in some way, or he knows someone who can. But it was you know, it was pretty sort of. It almost became the norm for me, if I'm honest with you. Like I felt like I couldn't tell my family members the fear and the feelings that were attached to it, because if I did, I thought something bad was going to happen to them. But I also felt like, you know, I had to do it. It was, you know, I had no choice. And it was very strange. And it's really common with what I was going through to be focused around your sort of routine times, like maybe you get into bed on a night, or when you're in your house and in the comfort of your own home. Like I'd walk through the school, you know, into school, and it'd be not very, you know, it wouldn't even really be there. I don't remember having anything in that sort of, any struggles with that element of it at school. I mean, there was other struggles, which, you know, well, we can go into, but you know, it wasn't, that element of stuff wasn't there. It was just more on a night, and it was annoying, but I don't know, I was able to just carry on and just
where do you think this stemmed from? Like, what was it? Was it something that was just innate in you? Was it maybe a condition? It sounds very much like OCD, that kind of age.
It's OCD, and it was, you know, undiagnosed for many years. I had no idea, you know, what really was going on, and it was made to, you know, especially as we got a little bit older, it became even more difficult to really understand it, because sort of the era that I grew up in, it was, you know, on the TV, it was obsessive compulsive cleaners and things like that, and the media like misrepresentation of OCD made it really difficult for people with OCD, because all of a sudden everyone thought that it was about being a little bit tidy or a little bit clean, and I'm a little bit OCD, or I need to line stuff up in a certain way, which is just normal in some ways. We all have that trait. A lot of people have that trait. But then, you know, people like Beckham, for example, someone I always like to talk about, because Beckham is somebody who struggles severely with OCD. But what happened is the media just latched on to the fact that he lines his Pepsi cans up in a certain way, or he has to have his football boots in a line. They didn't actually think of the fact that, you know, the feelings that were, and sort of the intrusive element of the thoughts and everything that comes with it, that was actually really sort of debilitating. And you watch him on some of these programs now, the most recent one, it's so obvious that he's struggling, you know, from it, and you know, and the sort of clean OCD that is, you know, quite common is OCD, like to an extreme. But what you know, it's not just, okay, I'm a little bit clean. It's not, you know, these guys are stuck in the house all day. I can imagine Beckham stuck in his house a lot of the day, you know, from what I could see from, you know, from what he was talking about. So it's a challenge having OCD, and I didn't really understand it. I think it was sort of mentioned briefly, but was never really sort of really brought to light.
Yeah. It reminds me of Alex Whitehead, who we had on the podcast, and he was talking a lot about his ADHD and just getting that clarity of, oh, this is what it is. Yeah. I understand myself a little bit more. Like a lot of what he said there, it sounds really disruptive. And like, for me personally, I will lay my things out for work the next day. I'll lay my clothes out. That for me is just being organised. I can't imagine having to ritualise that and having steps and layers on it. Do you think that continued into, you mentioned school there and other disruptions, did that carry on into school? Yeah,
so like it wasn't, so with school, you know, I didn't realise it at the time, but I was undiagnosed ADHD, and it was brought to light a lot. It was brought up to by my teachers a lot. But the difference, I guess, with me, and you know, and how it was really sort of misunderstood back then, I guess, is, you know, they thought it was like a behavioural thing, like a problem almost, like it was like the naughty kids had it. And for me, I was really like funny, but I was like respectful. So it wasn't like I was annoying. I was like a class clown, but the teachers liked me. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't like I was doing anything like vicious or malicious. It was just like I was just one of them kids who was just pretty stupid. You know, but I struggled in the school system at the time, and you know, I wasn't. You know, I struggled to learn like the other kids. I struggled to keep up the workload that the other kids, and then some days I'd be finished before them. You know, some days you'd just get this focus and I'd be fine. But yeah, I just, you know, for me, that was something that was always mentioned, and it wasn't actually until, you know, very, very much later in life when I got the diagnosis, which was 3 or 4 years ago now, and that was life-changing actually for me. 3 years ago, I got the diagnosis of ADHD, and that for me it made so much sense, like, you know, why I was how I was back then as a child.
Alex said exactly the same thing. As soon as he got diagnosed, it was like almost a weight was lifted off his shoulders, and it was like an avenue to progression and understanding and knowing why.
Yeah,
it's like like I said, when you were younger, you probably felt different. You knew you were, you know, just doing things other people weren't doing, but you couldn't understand why. And then when you've got a reason why, it's like, oh, now I get it. Now there's a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see why the diagnosis is actually like the first step towards being able to control it, manage it, and probably speaking to the right people, I would assume, as well.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and it was, I'll go into it later, but like the ADHD stuff, it was more about sort of like the medication I was put on, and which has been a game changer for me, and then being able to like really understand a lot of my behaviours, like that very very much overlap with the OCD, and it's really common for people to have OCD and ADHD. And if you look at the two together next to each other, there's a lot of like work where they almost like a lot of the stuff sort of coexists with both. So it's like it's almost like it made so much sense to me, to have it.
I'm just going to get you to bring your seat forward a little bit. Sure. Shall we hear that? Because there's a ring on the back of there. It's just knocking against the radiator.
Sound.
Oh, good. So at what point then did you kind of make the leap into being like, right, this is something that I've got, and did that develop any further into like other mental health issues?
Yeah, so for me, like up until, through school, what I'd say is I was that lad that brought everyone together. Huge friendship circles. Cool. The person that almost like, started all the parties. When we started drinking, I was always the most drunk, it was
last
always
man standing.
Yeah, well, no, I was the first man asleep. But I was the first one out every night, and I was the one that brought everyone together. And I was really lucky growing up because my mum and dad, my mum was a school nurse, my dad, worked in the bank, but we had over the back of our gardens, we backed onto like a tennis club, and every weekend there'd be like 100 kids on that tennis club. Once the tennis club's shut, everyone would be drinking their, their VK Blues and their, and
White Lightning.
I just had flashbacks then.
Yeah. Their Archer's Aqua.
Yeah,
but yeah, everyone was out there drinking, and it got to a stage where it was becoming a little bit dangerous. And my mum and dad, my mum being a school nurse, she was like, I can't be having this. And my dad was like, look, what we can do is we'll build something on the back of the house. So they built this conservatory, and underneath it they put a games room, and people could just climb up the wall from the tennis courts, and everyone was just in our garden. There'd be like 50-60 kids on a weekend, every single weekend.
Fair play to mum and dad.
My mum, they just sort of my dad's friend worked in like in gaming, so we had like 2 arcade machines, pinball machines, table tennis tables, all that stuff. It was unbelievable, really. And I think actually, if you speak to a lot of people who I grew up with, I think they'll owe a lot of their childhood to like my family, like parents, like looking after them. And that goes down through my generation, my brother's generation, and my sister's. It was a safe place where everyone could go, and they definitely turned a blind eye to the drink. It wasn't like they encouraged it, but they were like, look, you're going to do it. If you're going to do it and you're 16, 17, then I don't want to see it. But it's
a brilliant approach. That I think you probably have a lot of admiration for your parents for actually saying, if we can control it and it's in-house, there's less likely for things to go wrong.
100%.
They're not going to go out on the streets doing naughty stuff. They're going to be in the house, and even if it's not what we want them to be doing, they probably can't ddeny that you're going to do it anyway.
That's it. And you know what, we're really, really lucky, and I'm grateful for them, and that they know it. And it was, I think this is the reason why this next part of my story is like really, really unbelievable, like, because I went from being that guy that brought everyone together, huge friendship circles, like I said, just like, that guy that everyone would gravitate to literally going on a night out when I was 21. And I'd settled down a little bit. I'd found myself in a relationship with a girl from school that I'd known. She was, a really lovely girl. And I'd stopped the drinking as much. I wasn't drinking as much as I used to. But I went on a night out and I did have a few drinks, and never took drugs because my mum was a school nurse, and like I never touched any or anything like that. But went on this night out when I was 21. And after that night out, my life totally changed. I went from being that guy that, brought everyone together to effectively losing close to 10 years of my life to mental illness from over one night. And it was something over nothing. It was one of the lads who we were with, he'd cheated on his partner that night. It was on the outer circles of our friendship group, but we sort of all, lads knew the girls knew the lads, and it was like, And we'd seen him do it, and next day we all got together, we met up, and I was like, asked him why he'd done it. My morals were off the chain. I think that's quite common with OCD, like, people, which I'll go into again shortly, but it's, I was really annoyed with him, and I said to him, why did you do that? Like, he was like, do what? I was like, why did you cheat? He was like, I don't remember doing it. I was like, what? You don't remember doing it? I was like, well, we saw you do it. And he said, I don't remember doing it, so it didn't happen. And it was just that response, weirdly, that sent me into this spiral, because instead of being annoyed with him, all of a sudden I started to doubt myself. I started to say, well, you're in a relationship, Ollie. You've been on a night out. You've been out. You've been out a few times and drank. Imagine if you've cheated and you don't remember doing it. Right. So It was just that one little comment, one flippant comment.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you didn't, I guess it kind of was just in you to question yourself rather than question someone else.
Yeah.
And when you're young as well, you're much more easily swayed by other people's opinions, aren't you?
Yeah.
Whereas now, I'm sure if someone said that to you, you'd be like, no, mate, you're wrong. Today it's known as gaslighting, that, isn't it? Where you convince someone else that they're wrong when you really know that you're
Unless they really didn't remember it, I have no idea. It's not someone I'm still friends with today. But it's like, and not for that reason. It's not an issue. It's like if we saw each other, it'd be fine. But it's it was just weird how my mind just went from being, how it was to all of a sudden doubting every move that I'd made in that relationship. And it started off being about, imagine if you've cheated on that night, and then I'd go through the whole night. Who did you speak to? And then what started to happen is I started to like create these false memories from the night. So it's like the more I went over the story, I was building more stuff into it. Could I have accidentally kissed somebody? Could I have accidentally touched somebody? Could I have done something inappropriate? And it started off being about cheating, and it was about cheating for the first couple of months. But then all of a sudden it latched on to every little thing that I was morally against. So I could watch the news and someone had been attacked, like, a couple of miles from my house. What happens if you've done that, Ollie? You were near there at that time. You could have done that. Imagine if it was you, but you just don't realise you've done it. And what my mind, and it can be so powerful, all of a sudden I was like doubting every single ounce of the person I was. But I knew deep down I was never that person. But it was the feelings of the fear that was attached to the thoughts, the anxiety that came with it, which I didn't even know what anxiety really was back then. But then I found myself really, really quickly going from that to all of a sudden, spiraling into a state of depression. And if I'm totally honest with you, like, there was moments through that 10-year period where I was finding my way out of it. But actually it was, I was sort of had these little moments where I was like, I tried to show up, but then I wouldn't be able to do anything. But it was impossible. I think I was in a state of depression, to be honest with you, like with maybe a month or so here and there every couple of years. I was stuck in it for that full period of time. I wasn't the person I was. I was never going to be that person again, and I didn't realise it back then, but I never ever was that person that I was before again.
It's fascinating how it started as like just one small little virus essentially on one area of your moral compass, and it just sent your whole moral compass into like complete haywire. And again, not something I've heard of or even come across before.
It's something I resonate with that to a degree. I think I started to really doubt myself after a little bit, and you question if you're good enough. And as soon as that seed of doubt sort of grows roots and seeps in, it does start to affect other areas of your life. And I think relating to that on a personal level, 100%. I think there'll be people listening and watching who will think, yeah, that's me. That I've made that this huge issue, or like I feel responsible for making that a huge issue. And if like we're all sat around this table as probably action takers, and you seem a prime example of someone who will take ownership of a situation and say, well, it must be me. It must be me. I'm the problem. I'm an influence to this. I don't know if you felt like that at all.
Yeah, 100%. And I didn't. If I'm honest, I had no idea what was going on. I remember just sat in my house crying my eyes out to my mum, like, what is going on? I was adamant that I had to leave that relationship I was in because there was a possibility that I could have cheated. And just to give you a bit of an idea of how sort of wild it can get very quickly. I used to have to. The iPhone notes section, I discovered the iPhone notes, and it was one of the things that I actually thought at the time was going to help me, but actually I realised it was a huge catalyst, and I was effectively feeding into the problems really. I was having to write down my every move, so like I was having to document, and there was a date and timestamp for everything, and I couldn't, it got to a stage where if I left the house I couldn't look at another woman in the eye without my mind saying you've cheated, or I couldn't do anything. Like it was brutal, and I'd go out and I'd be writing notes, writing note after note after note after note after note, and I'd go home on a night and have to read them all back, and there'd be like 50, 60, 70 notes, and just to reassure myself that I'd done all, I'd been all right that day, and it was just intrusive thoughts really. And one of the things like what you're touching on there, like intrusive thoughts are really common. We all have them from time to time. You can have a thought that you think, what on earth is that? Like, that's not me. That's not me as a person. I wouldn't do that. It might be something really weird. It might be something like, I don't know, when you're driving your car, like I talk about this a lot, like if you're driving the car, I'm going to drive it off the road. Do you know what I mean? But you're not going to drive it off the road, right? It might be I guess hitting an animal when you never hit an animal, or doing something inappropriate with like a celebrity that you any of these things that might come into your mind. But a real common thought that we have, a lot of people have, is which is one that really, really, screwed me for a while. It was pushing a stranger in front of a train or a car. Like if you've not had the thought, you're going to think it's very strange. But 20% of males have the thought of pushing somebody, and they're not going to do it. It's just a thought, a passing thought, really. But for me, I've had that thought of pushing somebody, but then I've left the train station, and my mind's gone, did you actually push them? And then all of a sudden it's like this spiral. And for 3 months I've been stuck in this, my mind thinking the police are going to come and get me. They've got me on camera. They're looking for me. And it's just, the mind can be so powerful, like, and you just do not realise, like, and that sort of the sort of, I don't know, repetitiveness and the nature of what I was going through, it was just ongoing, constant. It's like someone was playing a tape over, rewinding it, playing it back, rewinding it, playing it back, and then adding bits and then rewinding it and playing it back. And it was just like, it was brutal, really brutal.
Ryan, you used the word earlier, like a virus. Like, that does sound like a huge bug in the system. But you're like, well, this is my brain. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way of putting it, actually.
Yeah, which you mentioned about the mind being really powerful. And I think in neuroscience now, it's quite common to know that the brain really struggles to tell reality from thought.
Yeah.
So you can literally imagine that that's happened and you can feel it. Like, if you think fast forward to, I don't know, some scenario, some imaginary situation, like, that's why meditation and visualization can be so powerful, because you can feel it. You can imagine yourself in a scenario and you can feel it, and it sounds like
twist on that. That's really good.
No,
I like that.
But I think for you've clearly got
the opposite,
that ability to really, like you said, play it back. I love that analogy where you can just, it's like being on repeat. It's like you rewind it, play it again.
That's what it felt like, and it was just it was demoralising. And I'll be honest, I made a really terrible decision, like within the space of like 6 months, maybe four to 6 months of starting to really struggle. I was working in the sports betting industry at the time for William Hill, and they offered the opportunity to relocate to Gibraltar. And my thoughts were like, if I can get away from everybody, no one's going to see what's going on, because everyone was wondering where I was for a start. Like, where is he? Like, he's the guy who starts everything. We're usually at his house on a weekend. Where on earth is he? Like, where's he gone? And then my parents were like, which was the hardest thing, they could really see me struggle, and we didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't want them to see me struggle, if I'm honest. So it was I made a really terrible decision to move to Gibraltar and work for William Hill over there. And when I first got over there, I met a lad called Ashley who helped me with the move. And he worked there as a manager. I'd actually trained him at William Hill when he first joined, but he progressed really quickly. And when I got over there, like, for the first month or so, I was like, trying to fit in a little bit, but I was struggling so bad. But I thought, if I get, I'd left the relationship pretty much, like, we knew it wasn't going to work. So that was one of the big things as well. I thought, if I can get away from that.
That's one thing I want to ask. How was your girlfriend at the time about all this? Because it all stemmed from you thinking that you cheated on her. Were you telling her how you were feeling? Was she, like, feeding this a little bit? Was she making it worse, or was she trying to calm you down? What was her role?
She was, we met up recently again. She was because we were friends, and I met up with her, and I didn't even realise it at the time that I'd actually told her that I was having the thoughts I was having. But she was brilliant, like, about the stuff. Yeah, like, good. It wasn't,
because if she was any worse, she could have really sent you into, like, a, you get some head cases out there, don't you? Me and girls who, almost convince guys that they're doing things when they're not.
Yeah, well,
like,
absolutely.
If she was of that kind of
No, she was great, and
then.
it didn't last long enough. I mean, I think I basically gave her, I gave her the pass, really, to escape, really, if I'm honest. Okay. Even though, we've always stayed friends. She was great, and it wasn't really. I didn't really open up too much until my most recent relationship, which was really changed everything. But when I was in Spain, it was like, I was over there on my own effectively, and I was drinking on a night trying to get to sleep some nights, and it wasn't. Everything went really bad really quickly, if I'm honest. Like, within the space of sort of 4 or 5 months, I found myself in another relationship, which she was a nice enough person, but it wasn't the right relationship. There was a lot of sort of cultural, like, differences. She was born in Nepal. She didn't really understand. I didn't really feel like I could talk to her about how I was feeling. There was I was always buying stuff I wanted. She was always sending money back to her family, and in a good way. Do you know what I mean? So there was like a real sort of disconnect there, and I stupidly got into another relationship, which made my thoughts even worse. I was thinking about all these little, and you're in like a village when you're in Gibraltar. It's like everybody. You're like, did I cheat? Did I do that?
We went last year actually.
Yeah.
And I realised how big the betting industry is over there.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, and it's not a good place. For me as well, for the betting element of it, I was I wasn't really into betting, and then I was really erratic when I was like struggling. I was putting 500 quid on a horse because I was like dealing with like these top clients. I was looking after the VIP clients for William Hill, and they were ringing up putting like 30 grand on something. I was like, oh, it's going to win, but 30 grand to them is like 50p to me probably. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
so you were convinced by their bets almost.
Yeah. So do you know what I mean? Like it's almost nothing, and I was putting like these large like bets on, thinking it's nothing to them. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's nothing. It's like 50p to them probably. It's like,
I can't believe they have VIP clients like that. I've heard that a couple of times.
I mean, it's sort of done with now, but we're talking a long time ago. It was like priority clients. I think that all had to change like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was more about the big spenders, and then they used to be able to like wine and dine them and stuff, which isn't good really. It's encouraging it, isn't it, in some respects? But there was some safety. There was a lot of safety elements to it, but it wasn't. It shouldn't be happening. I totally agree with that. But I was having like thoughts of like not wanting to be there. I was up on the. I remember going up onto the smoking roof and stood up there thinking like. My mind was basically telling me to jump, and I was like, do I? But I was like, nah, I need to keep going, and like I always think of my mum and my family, and I was like, no, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get better one day, and like it was really brutal. And whilst I was over that, I was really fortunate because Ash, who he sort of saw me decline a little bit, and he said, I've got my wife, my partner, she works in the hospital. She works as a psychiatrist. She's come over to work in there. She's like, can I send her to come and speak to you? And this was like a big turning point in my journey, even if it was like a couple of years in. But she came round, sat me down, and she was like, she spoke to me for 5 minutes maybe. She said, tell me how you feel, and then within 5 minutes she goes, I know exactly what's wrong with you. And she told me that I've got OCD. And I was like, this isn't OCD, I'm not tidying up, I'm not lining things up, she was like, no, OCD comes in many different ways, and one of the most debilitating forms of it is intrusive thoughts, rumination, negative images. And I was like, okay, that sort of makes sense. And my time over there probably lasted a couple of years before I had to come back because of my mental health, and that was a big sort of, I didn't really tell anyone that it was about that. I just, my family knew that, could see I was struggling, but that was a big, that was a big sort of, I guess, moment, because I really understood that, what was wrong with me. But actually it took me a long time to really understand and learn how to deal with it.
There's so many things I think people can relate to with that, especially the area where you said, I wanted to be away from my family. I didn't want them to kind of be exposed to what I was going through. I think as a bloke, we've all had kind of, bouts of issues in mental health. There's a certain level of embarrassment, I think, with it, where, especially in guys, where you don't want to accept, because in our own minds, we're all like our own little superheroes, aren't we? And we all have this idea of like, we're going to be great one day, and we'll do this, this, and this, and we have dreams and aspirations. And if something like mental health crops up and starts tugging at you kind of, trousers a little bit, you realise that, okay, I'm just going to push that to the side for a second. That'll go away if it just, I don't give it any attention. But then it just grows and grows and grows, and it gets to the point where, again, you don't want to face it. And it's an ego thing, I think, a little bit with the guys as well. Like, you don't want to accept anything wrong, because it's a tarnish on your mindset, on your reputation. People see it as that, I think. And I've personally known when I've had poor bouts of mental health, I don't want to burden anyone. I don't want to have anyone going through what I want to go through. So I totally get why you moved to a different country to get away from it, to be like, right, I'll go and deal with it over here and come back when I'm in the same mind. But actually,
I separated myself from everybody who I really needed.
And you cut off all ties. Yeah.
And I actually didn't just cut off all ties by doing that. It got to a stage where I couldn't look at anybody who was a part of my good past. So anybody who was involved, like my friends, like I was going through Facebook, like meticulously just deleting everybody who reminded me of good times, because I couldn't deal with it. I deleted everyone out of my phone book. I wouldn't, and it got to a stage where back then it was different Facebook, like, you know, everyone's got thousands of friends now, but back then people were like, why has Ollie like blocked me on social media? And people were texting me saying, you know, why have you blocked this person? Like what have they done? And you know, I think one of the big things, like, you know, looking back now, like the behaviours that I was portraying would just simply not slip through the net these days. Like, we're talking 15 years ago now. 16 years ago, the people just didn't get like mental health like they do today. So like, you know, if your friends suddenly started behaving like that, you'd think that was it. Back then we wouldn't have had any idea. You know, there was one other guy, one of my best mates, you know, at school, who I would say, I wish I'd have known what I know now, and I'd have been able to help him an awful lot better, because when he was, you know, displaying some of the behaviours more obviously, like in sight, when we were like 15, 16, he was almost ridiculed for that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I never ridiculed him as such, maybe bantered, but it was, you know, and you know, he seems to be in an all right place now, as far as I know. I still speak to his mum and dad, but he goes through periods himself, and you know, it upsets me to think that, you know, he was maybe 5 years behind the times, whereas I was, you know, I still feel like I was like way behind the times of like really people speaking about this sort of stuff.
I think that's the power of maybe intervention and just trying to spot it. Like, there's the famous Norwich City advert, I don't know if you've seen this, where it's the one who, you know, the guy who's really depressive and quiet, you know, well, stereotypically depressive and quiet, and then one day he turns up to a game and the guy who he was sat with, who was really active and vocal, he's not there anymore, lays a scarf down, you know, it turns out he'd, you know, taken his own life. And that's unfortunately what you see in, everyone has different ways of displaying it, like you said, and
100%. And a lot of the people who are, I believe, who are struggling are those that maybe who would fall under the you know, maybe neurodiverse, maybe they've got ADHD. You know, a lot of the characters that I know that really struggle now with, you know, through my friendship groups aren't you know, your neurotypical people. They're more like the ones that you would fall under that undiagnosed ADHD, the ones that were always like sort of like all over the place when you were trying to, you know, at school, the one who were very erratic. And you know, I think that's one of the things we're talking about, and it's the same goes with sort of like addiction and things like that. The friends that I've got who you know maybe dabble in more drugs, whereas I never did, are the ones that maybe just didn't have the right coping mechanisms, like you know, didn't find the right coping mechanisms. And I think I chose a much better route. Like, the drinking side of things was a problem whilst I was in Gibraltar, but when I came back I almost stopped the drinking, so people still didn't see me because I wouldn't go out, and I couldn't go to bars and pubs when I came back, because they were the place that really sort of triggered my anxiety even more. And you know, that, you know, I put on a lot of weight. I was like 4 or 5 stone heavier than I am now, and I was miserable, really. Like, you know, life was almost impossible over that period of time. And you know, it was probably about, how long ago now, it will have been maybe 2 or 3 years later when I managed to get back into the industry, the gambling industry. And I sort of liked the industry because I liked the feel. I didn't, you know, not so much from the betting element of it, even though I did get stuck in it, if I'm going to lie, in some respects, you know, from a betting perspective. And still to this day, you know, one of my biggest issues is, like, if I have a good day, I'm always searching for that little bit of extra, you know, anything I can find, that next dopamine hit, I'm like, boom, stick a £5 on a horse. And I can only lose 25 quid now, but like, you know, a week maximum. But it's like, it's just a really bad sort of habit that I've got, that, you know. But the industry for me, you know, I got back into the industry, I got a job in Skybet working in Leeds. And I think when I started working for them, it was really obvious that I was struggling quite early on, and there was long periods of sickness, and one really big moment, you know, turning point. And in fact, a really big moment, it was at the very beginning, where I met my partner, who you know, we're now together, and we've been together ever since, you know, coming up to 10 years. And she, you know, she came into my life, if I'm honest with you, at a time where I didn't really want to be here. And I remember saying to her, like, it makes me quite emotional, because I remember saying to her, like, when I met her, I said, look, stay away from me. Like, I just said, look, I'm absolutely, I wouldn't use this terminology now in the space I'm in, but I'm absolutely nuts. Just stay away. She was like, what do you mean? She was like, I have all these thoughts of that I'm a bad person, I'm hurting people, I'm cheating, I'm doing all these things. And I think because I opened up to her from the very beginning, like all of a sudden I felt like there was something, you know, she understood me from the very start. And she was like, you know, she had come out of a long relationship. She had 3 kids, so I took on the 3 kids, which my mates were like, get away, you don't want to be taking on 3 kids, like you can't even look after yourself. But actually they gave me a totally different perspective on everything. I always say, like, you know, when a kid swings past you on a light fitting, then all of a sudden, like, actually everything's okay. You know, and you know, they gave me a different perspective, and I looked at things really differently, and they taught me to love in a different way, and they taught me a lot about myself, and they made me grow up again a bit quicker. And she was like my guardian angel, if I'm honest. And we would chat, you know, we would talk about, you know, these thoughts from the very beginning. I was having to tell her, you know, that I'm having thoughts that I've cheated on her. I'm having thoughts that I could have cheated. And do you know what? There was periods where we went 2 to 3 months without me being able to give her a kiss or give her a hug or show her any affection, because my mind was telling me it was somebody else when I was with her. That is how powerful it was. And, you know, I was, as you can imagine, getting into that relationship, I was like free falling, effectively. Like, things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm so glad that she stuck with me and, like, she helped me through.
Were you speaking to anyone else about these things?
Not really, no.
So she was probably the first person that came along where you were like,
I really trusted.
She gets it. I've been very upfront with her, and she's not run a mile.
Yeah.
Why is she not run a mile? Okay, she understands it. She doesn't mind listening to me. And I'm sure alongside that, because she liked you, she was trying to help you.
Yeah.
And then that was the first kind of maybe lifeline that you had. And
she was a huge lifeline. And then the second lifeline came quite quickly as well, because I was with work. They sort of picked up on the signs. They could see something wasn't right. And, you know, I remember sort of going into work, and I'd always sit in the corner, like, on my own. I'd talk to people, but, you know, and I'd try and be normal as you can, whatever normal is. And I remember my manager coming up behind me, put his hand on my shoulders, and he's like, Ollie, we're worried about you. And I was like, I'm worried about myself. Do you know, I said, look, I for the first time I just blurred out, and I went, look, I cannot see the screen. And he went, what do you mean? He was like, come into a room. So we went into a room, sat down, and I was like, I can't see the screen. He was like, I said, I can't see what I'm meant to be doing. All I see is these thoughts constantly, like, you've hurt someone, you've harmed someone, you've done something bad. And I was like, I just can't live. Like, I don't know what to do. And I, like, broke down. And he was like, listen, you've been here for a couple of years. You know, we have noticed that, you know, you're still performing, but you know, and that maybe was in itself was something that was keeping me going. You know, in some respect, the job was easy. You know, I didn't progress for a reason, because I didn't want to. You know, I needed to just carry on and just do I was working in social media. It was really simple, but it was like, it gave me the opportunity to keep going in some respects, and I'm grateful for the Sky Bet from that element. But what they did next, even better. You know, they said to me, look, take some time off, we want to support you, take 3 months off and we'll pay you. Wow. And I was like, whoa. So
fair play for a big company to come out,
company.
To come out and do that, and actually not only give you that time, but also actually notice in the first place that something's wrong, and confront you about it. Because a lot of companies, you know, people are indisposable nowadays. You can get someone at a click of a finger.
I was at that level as well. It wasn't like I was anything. It's not like they couldn't replace me. They could have replaced me really easily. But they saw something in me from the beginning, and which I was grateful for, because I was masking anyway. So I was masking who I really was. I was still deep in the depths of depression when I even got the job. But they took me under their wing, and he said, look, take some time off. We'll look after you. They'll put me on a plan to get, like, therapy, which, again, therapy's not been the right sort of route for me, if I'm honest with you. It's never really worked for me, and I'm not saying it doesn't work for anyone, but it was different for me. It just didn't.
What was it about therapy that you didn't go with?
Well, I'll explain to you, like, what did work, and then I'll probably be able to explain it a little bit better, because therapy, like, for me was like, it it was never the right time. And one of the biggest problems we face, like especially at this stage when they offered me therapy, I'd already been through therapy 3 times, but I hadn't really properly been through therapy, because what happened was like, I went to the NHS, I sat down with the doctor, I need help. Okay, we're going to get you help, we're going to get you therapy. You're going to get therapy in 2 years' time. I'm like, 2 years' time? I was like, and I'm neurodivergent. I take things quite literal. So they're like, you're going to have to wait. So I'm like,
hold on a minute. So if I went to the doctors right now and I needed help, serious help with my mental health, I'd have to wait 2 years to see a therapist.
Anything up to 2 years, 18 months, 2 years. Kids wait 5 years. They go through the whole school before they even get the help. It's an absolute. Wow. It's they cannot deal with phenomenal. That. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can access professional help and pay for it, but I wasn't in a position to be able to pay. I wasn't not in a position like maybe my family could have supported me, but I wasn't really talking to anyone at the beginning of the journey. I wasn't opening up about it. Do you know what I'm saying?
You're not going to put a load of money in something that you're not even 100% convinced is going to work.
Yeah, exactly that. And what happened for me is like I'd wait 2 years because I'd literally wait. And my biggest message now to anyone is don't wait. Don't wait. Like find something else, or find. There's so many great groups around. Like there's an app that we talk about called the Hub of Hope, and you put in your postcode, and you can find local support groups within your area where you can go and meet other people. You can narrow the search down to like whether you've got OCD, ADHD, eating disorder, whether it's to do with cultural differences or whatever that may be. You can like narrow it all down, find groups, find people like you who are going through similar things, and meet up with them. The Hub of Hope.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's an absolute game changer. It was set up by a guy who I know he's based over in Liverpool. It was an Excel sheet that he decided he was going to do, and now it's the biggest mental health database I believe in the world that contain it's almost like the yellow pages of like support, and it's unreal. Brilliant. And you can access things like sliding scale therapy where you pay what you can afford. So you might have therapists that have to do 150 hours before they become qualified, and then you can pay a tenner for these guys so they can get the qualification, but they're still they're trained to do the job. It just helps them as well. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need sometimes somebody who's highly trained, depending on what. Yeah. And for me, like I went through that period 3 times before this even happened, before I got the sign off with work. So 3 times I went through that cycle of going in, bearing all, waiting 2 years, and then when you come round, you're not really in that same position you were before. So you could be worrying about something else. Is it the right time? Mm-hmm. Have a few conversations with people, didn't really help. Never really got around to actually doing the therapy that I was meant to do, and it was a bit of a nightmare, really, that sort of cycle. But for me, it was when I got signed off, because I woke up that next morning. I remember the day so clearly. It was like boiling hot outside. It was in the middle of, it was like back end of June going into July. And I was stuck in like a rut where I'd wake up in the morning at like probably 7 o'clock, but I wouldn't ever open my eyes till like 11 or 12 and I knew it was early because I could hear like my kids around going ready for school, but I couldn't open my eyes because as soon as I did, my mind would be like, straight back onto the thoughts, and it'd be boom. It would just be like I'd be bombarded with these thoughts constantly. I was like, don't open your eyes, don't open your eyes. I didn't want to face the day. And that day was not too dissimilar. I woke up at about 11 in the I managed to open my eyes at about 11 in the morning, and I just had a different feeling about that day. I had my workplace supporting me on top of my family. I had a couple of friends that didn't let go. There was 1 or 2 friends that stood by me through everything. 3 friends who really stood by me through it all, who I wouldn't allow me to push them out. And I thought, I've got to do something. And I made a decision that day that I honestly believe literally saved my life, changed my life forever. I went into my cupboard, pulled out some old gym kit that I hadn't really worn for many years. Left the house, had no intentions of doing anything really. I was just walking, started to run a little bit, started to walk. I was never a runner, hated running, like most people. And after about 40 minutes of walking and running, I stopped, and everything stopped for the first time in my mind. And it was the first time it happened in 10 years. And I was like, what has just happened? And don't get me wrong, like it lasted like 5 minutes, and then everything came back. I live for that feeling, and from that day I've pretty much run every single day for the last 7 years. I've ran 24,000 kilometers, averaged, when I last checked I'd averaged 10k a day for 6.5 years, but it's slowed down a little bit, so I'd imagine it's probably still 8 or 9k for you know, so pretty much, yeah, it's been relentless, but it's been this unbelievable journey of like self-discovery and like rediscovering like who I am. And it didn't last long. The best way to explain it was like someone's chasing me, like the thoughts were always chasing me. But I live for that feeling, and you know, when I finished the run, everything felt like it was okay, and it lasted 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes some days, but that moments of respite was just it allowed me to like think about the future for the first time, and allowed me to think, actually, look, there's more to this, and I can get through it.
It was your first lifeline of like hope of like, I'm doing something positive here. What was it about that day you woke up on your first day of leave? What was it that drew you to the gym kit? What was it about?
It was boiling hot, and I knew that I needed to do more than just sit there, and I couldn't, you know, I didn't really appreciate exercise until I was, you know, until I rediscovered it. And, you know, I look back through my whole journey, throughout my whole childhood, and I honestly believe that I was self-medicating throughout my whole life. Like, you know, I had, like I said, there was a tennis club at the bottom of the garden. I could play tennis. At school, I did every single sport under the sun. I did cricket, I did rugby, you know, anything I could get involved in. I was football mad, like literally played every night. You know, we'd play on the tennis courts, we played roller hockey, all these things. And I feel like, if I'm honest with you, I was managing all these things through the exercise, and it was just I don't know why I did it, to be honest with you. I was never a runner, but I just thought, this is it, got to do it.
We have to think how common that is. Like how common is it in men to get to a certain age and then work takes over? Maybe they have a family, they spend less time on themselves, they don't move as much, and then they do enter in that spiral. And I think I'm really conscious of saying this because me and Ryan are in the industry, but I'm aware of my own biases as to how much we love training and how good it makes us feel and how good it makes us clients feel. But to hear someone like yourself say, listen, I wasn't doing that, and then I did, and it felt like, yes, I was still running from something, but I got that feeling afterwards. Like,
yeah.
That to hear that from someone like yourself, for me, yeah, for us is really powerful, because we're in it every day. We are the guys to say, let's get moving more, let's do this. But for you to make the choice on your own terms, would you say it was out of desperation at that stage?
100% out of desperation, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it's the first thing that goes. It's the first thing you lose whenever you start to struggle with anything. You almost do the opposite of what you're meant to do. It's like, you know, you've got big groups of friends. I'll delete my friends. You've got, you know, I exercise all the time. I'm going to stop exercising. It feels like the right thing to do. But I think like it's one of the biggest challenges for people like me, who, you know, ADHD, obviously had underlying mental health, like, you know, struggles from a very young age, is when you're sort of exposed all of a sudden to like nights out drinking. You know, all of a sudden things stop. You know, people are smoking. I want to, you know, do you want to try smoking? Yeah, why not? Try a little bit of smoking. Not obviously just cigarettes, but like all these things like seem the cool thing to do at the time, but actually they're the things that can have such a huge impact on us. And, you know, for me, that was what it was. And, you know, the running, within a month, I set up Run For Your Mind, which had absolutely zero idea what I was doing with it. Like, I just thought, you know, I need to talk about this. Like, if this is helping me, this can help anybody. So I set up an Instagram account called Run For Your Mind, and it was I think that was probably very much the making of me, if I'm honest. Like, you know, when you're in that situation and you struggle so severely, you naturally look to try and help other people, because you feel like you can't actually help yourself. So for me, it was like, I'll be able to help loads of people. But what I soon found, like, you know, as the community built, was all of a sudden, like, actually, these guys are just like me. They're going through exactly the same thing as me. I'm actually not alone with this. People were saying, I have them thoughts about cheating. I have them thoughts about hurting people. I have them thoughts. And all of a sudden you feel like, actually, you know what? We're not alone. And the community just, and through that, you know, I made great friends. I started to blog about stuff that I was doing. I had this, like, I was always very ridiculous when it came to like buying stuff. Like, there's big problems with buying things. Like, I had this drone that used to like follow me around, and when I was doing my runs, and I used to initially didn't really show my face. I just used to do it as like this is how I'm feeling, like almost like a blog thing. Okay. And then I showed my face, and then, you know, more people were willing to interact anyway. And you know, we've got I set up a virtual run club before virtual stuff was even cool, like way before, you know, COVID. And we've got like 4,000 runners in there, like, you know, who we've sort of met through like the Run for Your Mind page. And yeah, it's been an amazing, you know, the people that I've met there, I've been able to personally help thousands of people as well, which has been a dream really. And, you know, that's just, you know, from just me wanting to give a little bit back and make sure no other person has to go through this, what I'm going through on their own.
So many powerful things about what you've just said there in terms of the exercise itself. Going back to that, I just look back at, you know, us as human beings, we can't take away things that we've done for thousands, millions of years. We've always moved, we've always exercised, we haven't sat in front of a computer and worked. And something as small as taking one aspect of evolution away from human beings can be so negative in such a disruptive way. And that running, as soon as you started running, and I have it when I exercise as well, same thing, like I've been training for over 20 years now. My biggest bouts of poor health, mental health have been when I've stopped training, I've stopped exercising, whether it's through injury, whether it's for other things. And I think that if you can inject that back into someone's life and show them the benefit of it, it's amazing how that just has such a positive impact on them, stopping the worrying just for a short period of time in their day. It's that one moment where, like you said, where you just aren't thinking about the intrusive thoughts, you aren't thinking about the negativity of your life and where you're headed, and suddenly you start seeing a future. And you start seeing, and it's a very much, the word's going to elude me, but as you said, you're running away from your problems and you're running towards hopefully something positive. It's very literal, isn't it? It's very metaphorical.
Exactly, yeah. There's something very metaphorical about running as well, because you're constantly moving forwards. And that's another big thing, like, and that's what gets me out of bed every day. Like, and for me, it's like, the things I had to do was, you know, it had to be straight away. So I'd have a pint of water by my bed, my kit lined up, and I'm out the door in 10 minutes from waking up. Really? I have to get I have to get ahead of my thoughts constantly, and that's still the same to this day. And the running, it's every day. Some days it's longer. You know, there'd be times where my wife would be ringing me. She'd be like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in Bradford." She was like, "Well, what? Why are you in Bradford?" I'm running. She was like, when are you going to be back? I'm about 2 hours away. You know, it's like, it was, and she was very understanding, and it took time for her to be very understanding as well, because it just, you know, but she did get it straight away, and she knew, but took time for her to understand that I'd be gone 4 or 5 hours some days, you know. Some days I was like, you know, some days I was running 5-6 hours. Really? So it was like at the beginning, so it was a lot, and look, right, what the running enabled me to do is, it enabled me to have them moments of clarity, right? But what it didn't enable me to do, it didn't enable me to live a life. And that first 3 years of that, it was more about helping other people, online, supporting people, and things like that. The biggest turning point in my journey was probably around about 3 years ago now, and I'd read this quote in a book, and it was, "Learn to become comfortable feeling uncomfortable." And I remember running downstairs to my missus, and I was like, what do I need to do? She was like, "What are you on about now?" And I'm like, "What do I need to do?" She's like, "I've just read this quote. It says, 'Learn to become comfortable feeling uncomfortable.'" I said, "Imagine if I conquered the most difficult thing, then I'd probably be able to do all the things that I can't do now, like go out and see people and go to pubs and bars." And she was like, "Maybe." And I was like, "Well, what?" She was like, "What is the most difficult thing you can do?" And we sort of went back through my time in corporate, my time in education, and it all boiled down to one thing, and it was speaking in front of people. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do any talks or anything like that, you know, and like businesses wanted you to pitch, or like school wanted you to do projects in front. I was like, I couldn't do it. I hated it. I couldn't do it. So I said, "Look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my story. And if I can share my story, then maybe life will get better." And I had this, it was really random, like about 6 months later, I'd been back at work, and because I had another bout of sickness, and even through the running, I was still having bouts of sickness, because I still couldn't manage it was just better. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I was all of a sudden like cured. And it's still the same to today. And they basically did this thing at work called the Untold Stories of the Business. And someone said to me, "Ollie, you need to come and do this." And I was like, "No, this is what I've made a promise to myself to do. I'm going to have to do it. Anyway, so I did this talk, my first talk, and it was like 15 minutes, and it was like a Q&A style talk. They'd hired out this for this huge like airport bunker at Leeds Bradford for Skybet.
Skybet, okay.
And it was like called the Gathering. So every year they had the Gathering. It was like a big festival, work festival. And they said, do you want to come and share your story? I was like, okay. And it was random. It was on the set of Victoria, like the ITV production. And my first ever talk was sat on Victoria's bed delivering this talk to 300 people. And I was like, what the hell? Could this get any more like random? Anyway, I did it, and I was like, yeah. And that's when, a couple of the managers came up and said to me, look, you shouldn't be working here. You should be doing this. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah. And then they were like, we're going to help you. And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, we're going to get you on like a speaking course through this fund. They used to have a fund called the Ninja Fund, where you could just like use it on whatever you wanted. Like you could have £1,000 a year to spend on like personal development. And they were like, we'll get you on like a TED style speaking course. And I learned a bit from it, but it wasn't my style of delivery. More about the vulnerability of just speaking rather than being like, set into like a structure. But anyway, it was great. I learned a lot. And that was another thing that they did for me. And, when I'd come back from sicknesses, they've incorporated running breaks into the middle of my shift. So as a company, they were, I can't speak, high enough.
Absolutely
unreal, really. So, but I did that, and it just set me off on this mad journey that I'm on now.
And that's kind of obviously escalated now to some of the things you spoke about. You mentioned obviously that was your first talk, was it, at Sky?
Yeah, so that was the first proper one. Then I did like 6 other ones, like to different areas of our business internally.
So obviously Skybet have got a lot of things in different pies. I assume some other things came off the back of that Skybet talk.
Yeah.
Just talk us through the kind of process then of doing some of the big talks you've done to this day.
Oh gosh, yeah. And like I talk about this I just want to be really clear. I'm not saying this in a way like check me out. It's more like what on earth's going on.
How did this happen?
How on earth did this happen? Because I literally, it went from that one talk to, I think something went out on social media.
It must have been a really impactful talk. Did you get people coming up to it at the end and saying, I resonate with that?
Yeah, I was almost like, I was nervous. I was very anxious. It wasn't well delivered. I wasn't a speaker. It was just
sometimes though. What I find
I was vulnerable, and they could connect.
It sounds like you were very real. Yeah,
real. Yeah, there's a lot of people. Like when you go to these talks and you go on courses on how to talk, you can become a bit robotic. You lose the realness. You lose the authenticity of what you're saying, and you have to put that in your own words. There's ways you can maybe format it a little bit, like you said, but there's a realness when it comes from the heart. And you don't ever want to lose that. And obviously, with it being your first talk, you had nothing but raw emotion there.
100%, and that's how it's been ever since. And I'd never want to lose that, because I wouldn't be staying true to myself if I was going up there doing this. Like I have to feel everything I'm saying. And there's times when I get up on that stage and I'm in pieces. Like and it's
like,
real,
like
and they
falling, like
not like I'm emotional. I have to take a breath, and I'll my eyes are well up, and I'll probably cry a little bit. But it's a journey in itself. And when I look back on it, I think wow. But it went from I guess that happening, and then we all of a sudden quickly got locked down, and then it was sort of, I was like, damn, that's the end of that dream. And that was a difficult period of my life, if I'm honest. Like, routine and structure is massive for someone like me, and for most people who've got mental health related concerns. It's like you need that structure and routine. That's how we sort of rebuild, and that was stripped away from us, and that was hard. But then coming out the other side of it, obviously I became very relative in the respect that so many other people were struggling and maybe coming forward because of it, and businesses wanted to hear stories of people who have overcome stuff, and stories of resilience and things like that, and so it went from that, like a couple of talks at my workplace to then, well, my first talk that I did was for Microsoft, which there you go. I didn't just do it like it went from that
straight to the top.
So did a talk.
How did that come about, that talk in Microsoft?
Someone contacted me through Run For Your Mind. Yeah,
right,
it was Microsoft Ireland. So I delivered a talk to them, and then the next one was Burberry. Which I delivered a talk across UK and Asia. So there was like 400 people. This was a virtual one. And it sort of snowballed from there, really, and I sort of quickly learned from the organisations I was working with, because it went from, you know, it was like Burberry, Microsoft, it was like Virgin Media, big companies like pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline, construction companies, Overbury, just unreal companies, BT, we've worked with, ISG. It goes on. It's ridiculous, but I don't know how it happened, if I'm honest, but I'm very grateful that I get the opportunity, I've been able to speak to thousands of people, you know, about my journey.
It happened purely because, like you said, you wanted to help someone. You realised like how good that running was. You realised how much of a bad spot you were in, and there was something that just put almost like a block in the kind of in the brain for a second.
Yeah,
and you're like, "Whoa, that was cool." And then it's addictive, that feeling, isn't it? And if anyone else is struggling, how do I get them to kind of experience that? And you know, the Run for Your Mind stuff and the community that you built there, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. It's just to build a community of people who are so invested in, you know, one message, helping each other. And I guarantee there's a lot of people in that community who value that community so much, because it's a place they can go and talk, and they realise they're not abnormal like you felt when you were 6 years old. And these people have probably been going through similar things, I would imagine, their whole life, similar to the way you have. And suddenly there's a community of runners, of people doing positive things, giving them answers, giving them coping strategies. That is priceless for someone who's in the thick of it and wants that break that you had.
Yeah, and I think businesses find it really difficult as well to sort of interact with people who they know and they see every day. Where if you get someone in who's an external, I think they say that, like, I think it's like you're 21% more likely to sort of really invest in somebody who's like sharing like a real life story to someone who's just trying to teach people about mental health. So like lived experience is like a huge thing, like, you know, it's a big thing that people, I think businesses really need. And you know, I quickly found that some of them, it did feel like I was a little bit of a tick in a box, which I didn't really like, and that's where I got the opportunity to train to be a mental health first aid instructor. So I delivered that on the back of my talks, and then it was about building like programs and workshops for companies, which has been pretty amazing. But I think one of the big things for me was I had a really cool business model, which I'm actually I'm proud of myself for actually coming up with this idea. Actually, it's actually quite clever. But like my business model was, because schools meant so much to me, like because of the youth mental health element of it and how much my journey started when I was, you know, a lot younger. I offered with every talk that a corporate booked, I made them sponsor a school. It was incorporated in the cost. So right. Like then what I then do is I deliver a talk in a corporate, and I might speak to 300 people. Like for example, I was over in Sheffield a couple of months back I'd been doing some keynote stuff for the NHS, and I've been going to the conferences, like the nursing conferences, 300-400 nurses in a room, and then I'll be like, look, on the back of every talk, you know, you get a sponsor of a school, put a school in a hat and pick a name out the hat, you know, from all the people in the room. And then, you know, I'll go and deliver the talk. I'll invite the NHS with me to go and to see the talk in the school and, you know, co-brand my slides. And it's a way of them sort of building that community feel, but it's also a way of like, me not just impacting 300 people in a room, me impacting 300 kids as well, and that for me was like a really big thing, you know.
I absolutely love that. That's so a really unique idea. But from the offset to have the foresight, like, I want to go and help people at the start of the journey, at the beginning, where it kind of started for you.
Well, the biggest compliment I can give you, Ali, is if you rocked up to my son's future school and did a talk, I'd be thrilled. I'd be absolutely proud of the
We can do that, can't we? We can try and do one where we can do it on behalf of you guys or something, you know, just
that'd
as
be awesome. That'd be really good.
But like, I'd love that. It's just the mad thing about this whole conversation, this whole thing as well, with the, you know, when the conversation surrounding the speaking side of it was actually, like, I look back and all this stuff I've done, I'm so proud of myself for doing it. I'm grateful, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't actually mean an awful lot in comparison to the things that really mean a lot to me. Like what this allowed me to do is like the running enabled me to sort of have that thoughts and freedom from the thoughts. The talking enabled me to live and rebuild a totally different life. But actually, the both of them together, it's more about what they've done for me. And, you know, the biggest achievement for me is not the fact that I've delivered all these talks. You know, I was in Canada last year working with the Canadian Premier League of Tennis Canada. It isn't about all these like big things. It's about the life and the things I can do that are so simple that most people take for granted. Like, I was able to go for a pint with my dad for the first time in 10 years and sit and have a drink with him and enjoy it. And like, that is the most emotional thing for me, because that is what it's really enabled me to do. Like, everything I've done, aside, I'm so glad I've done it, and I'm grateful. But it's because what it's allowed me to do, not necessarily what I've done. Because I'm only just getting started with that stuff. It's going to get, it's going to carry on.
I guess it depends how hippy-dippy you want to go with it, but I think you were always meant to do this. I think it depends how much you believe in the universe, and we've just been speaking with another guest recently, Noor, who's all about the universe, and she believes that everything's for a reason. There's a message out there, and I'm becoming more in tune myself with this idea that I think we go through things for a reason. Like, maybe you had to go through that. Maybe it was just something you had to do to find who
certainly
you are.
Something I'm believing as well. So,
you know what I mean? Like, you had to. As horrible as it is, as difficult it is, some people go through the worst shits in the world to eventually find out what they have to do. Some people, it's not too bad. They find it pretty early on and don't go through crazy amounts of shit. For you, it's been like a complete run round the ring, hasn't it, basically? Do you know what I mean? And you've come out the other end and been like, actually, I'm doing something really positive now. And it's not the positive thing that you're doing in the end, it's the fact that it's now going to help you understand who you are and where you should be, and give you purpose back. Like, actually give you a purpose to be like, it's helping me and it's sending me in the right path.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was meant to be. I'm grateful for every battle that I've faced in some respects. I wouldn't want any other person to go through it, which is like the mission I'm on. But I do believe that, everything does happen for a reason, and the position I'm in now, I'm lucky to be in the position I'm in. I'm lucky to still be here, if I'm honest. And if you spoke to any of my mates back at school and said to them, what will you be doing when you're older? Like, before any of this happened, like, they'd have said that he'll be doing something that would be making a difference to other people's lives, because that's who I was as a person. I didn't allow kids to be bullied when I was at school. One of the first talks I actually got, I think it was like the third or fourth talk I got, was in working in a delivering talks across like a hospital where kids had been sort of kept in, who were struggling with their mental health, and I didn't know who the person was who invited me, because then she'd been married and her name had changed, and when she got there she said to me, do you recognise me? And I was like, I do, yeah. And it was a girl whose brother I'd looked after when he was at school, who was bullied all the time. She said, if it wasn't for you, then I don't think he would be here. And I don't think he'd have got through school anyway. So like, these things that, like, I was always that person.
There was little signs there when you were a kid. And you wanted to help.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's the reason why the work that I've been doing now, like, I'm sure we're probably running out of time because I talk a lot, but I'm very aware of that. But, one of the big things we've done recently was, is to lean on like businesses' social value and corporate social responsibility commitments, meaning that, they have a certain amount of money that they have to put into good causes. And we came up with a concept last year to do some talks across schools in the UK. We did I met a guy called Daniel Wilshire, who's been is now my business partner, and we're about to launch a new business soon, which is really exciting. But we launched a project called 100 Talks for Change, and we came up with the idea of delivering 100 talks in 20 days across 63 schools in the UK, travelling from Newcastle to London, finishing on World Mental Health Day last year. And it was like, it started by a little idea, but it turned into something unreal. Like, I mean, we had BBC supporting us from like a creative perspective. We partnered with like the likes of Hayes, who were a huge like educational recruitment company, ISG, a big construction company, Accor put us up in hotels all across the UK. We had Gravitate, a Sheffield company, supporting us, and some other really cool companies that just backed us and believed in us. And we didn't make any money from it. It was more about getting that proof of concept. But we filmed a documentary about the need for the work that we're doing into education. And you know what, it was one of the greatest journeys that I've ever been on. And
one intense 20 days.
Incredible. I'm just doing maths on that. What's that, 5 schools a day?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
We were
really
getting
cool.
phone calls from parents, we're getting emails, we get hundreds of messages from kids just like, thank you, I understand what I'm going through now, I'm going to talk to somebody about it. And people telling us that we'd save their children's lives. That
20 days in the grand scheme of things might not have been massive, but in certain kids' lives, that'll be the game changer.
Yeah, well, it was.
It's scary to think how many kids you will have influenced in those
25,000 kids we spoke to in that over that period, which was just unreal. And I listened to one of your podcasts with Kate, the cricketer, and she was speaking about what I call a stress bucket, the container, and it was so interesting listening to, because I was like, this is like one of my big takeaways from a lot of my talks. I carry around this massive bucket that I've had with stress bucket written on it, and I've got a huge bag of balls that I carry around everywhere I go. And I talk to young people about the stress bucket analogy, about like what stress goes into your bucket and what happens if you don't, like, I think she mentioned a tap, like if you don't let a bit of it out. And I think that is something I was actually taught at school, but I ignored it. And then I later saw it on a mental health first aid course that I deliver, and I was like, why didn't I listen? It all makes total sense. And I think that's what happened with me. I think that I was choosing the wrong coping mechanisms, which was just topping up the bucket. Whereas if I'd have just carried on with the sport and things like that were really helpful, I could have let out some of that stress. And it's a huge thing that, stress is the biggest contributor to mental illness. And it can start with stress and it can turn into anything. And sometimes it's just about how do you manage that and how do you deal with that. And for me, like, I've got incredible coping mechanisms now. I run every morning when I wake up. I introduced ice showers, cold showers, 4 minutes every day. I've been doing it for about 600 days now, and that's changed. I mean, it's getting it's headache cold now. It's great. It's like the best time of the year. But it gives you the same level. Apparently, it gives you the same. It gives you more of a hit of dopamine than it would than like a line of cocaine. So like just having that one 4-minute cold shower in the morning gives me probably an extra 2 hours focus in the morning that I'd never have.
Do you go straight in cold, or do you go like warm?
Never introduce any warm, just straight cold. Never any warm after either.
I don't think I could like you anymore, but now I'm even more impressed.
But that's just like, I've got in the ice bath. Who can be arsed messing around with that every day? Like, do you know what I mean?
You've got a cold shower.
Yeah, just getting it, and it can make a huge difference, especially for kids who are ADHD. And I have kids messaging me now saying, "Oh, I've been doing the cold showers, and I can learn so much better, and I focus better in class now, and doing much better." And it's like, wow,
I would say I've always been like the most warm-blooded person. I'm the opposite. I see how hot I can get it in the shower before it scalds me.
Yeah,
I think you're a convert soon. I think Ryan's pending. You're going to be a convert.
Do it yourself?
I love it. Yeah, same.
I've never been forward, but I went to Wales earlier this year, and it was right on the bay, Red Wharf Bay. And one morning, there was a guy coming out of the ocean. He had these little speedos on. And I thought, what an absolute warrior! I was just in awe of this bloke. And then one of the guys we were staying with comes out, and I just flippantly said to him, "Fancy going in the sea?" Thinking he'd say, "No chance, mate." He went, "Yeah, go on, I'll go in with you." And I said, "Oh shit, but I'll go in now." So I got my trunks on, went down, and it was obviously absolutely bolted. The kind of cold where you walk in and your legs go numb straight away. Yeah. And it was one of the most horrible 2 minutes of my life when I first sat in it. But then after that, it was just so refreshing. Yeah, and then when I got out, again, the endorphin rush, the dopamine, I felt like all morning I had like clarity as well, like this really clear thought, and I was very concise in what I was saying. There was no blurriness. I couldn't describe it to you, but unfortunately I haven't been back in since, but I do need to get back to the cold stuff. I think it was amazing how much it had an impact on me.
Yeah, it's pending for you, definitely. I think so. It's that where I'm really in tune with like what the stories that people tell themselves about their weaknesses, and you seem to be a prime example, Ollie, as someone who's made a career out of the self-imposed weaknesses. Like, like you said, didn't want to speak when you were younger, didn't want to present. You're doing that for a living. Didn't like running.
I'm a great case study for everything that's wrong, but then hopefully now everything that I've been able to, and even like the gym, the OCD element for gym, if anyone who's got OCD, it's very difficult with like cleanliness and stuff. And I was really fortunate. I got into like a boot camp, a guy called Mike Cross in Leeds, set up, and it's been brilliant. I was going there, and that opened the doors for me to get back into the gym. And then unfortunately, then with my wife doing, the kids, my situation with the kids, like it was a bit more difficult at home for me to make the evening classes. So I ended up because of getting the confidence again through there, I joined a gym, and I'm at the gym every day. So that's another big thing. So I run in the morning, I'm at the gym in the afternoon, and
I went. So you're okay with the gym? Even though there's an OCD element to it,
so I've been doing all the classes.
Was there a barrier there? Was there like a little bit of apprehensive? Because obviously we coach a lot of people who we use the gym facilities with, and if there's someone that we're taking on, is there anything that you would recommend, I guess, they do when they first get into the gym, anything we can do to help those?
I think like for people with OCD, like it depends on how you are. Like coming out the other side of COVID, it definitely heightened all of that cleanliness element of stuff for me, which made it really difficult. I always joke about the fact that it's like going to a public toilet after COVID was like it was like being in Crystal Maze, you know, when you're trying to get out, like hovering around and then like lifting stuff up with my feet and like with my elbow and like, you know, touching stuff with tissues and things like that. It's a challenge. I think the big thing about OCD is you've almost got to the key to overcoming OCD is obviously to do what your mind is, you know, if your mind's saying you can't touch that door because it's full of germs, you've got to touch it, you know what I mean? That's
facing it head on.
Almost when it comes to that element of stuff anyway. I think the big thing for me was I did find, I'm not going to tell you which gym I go to because I don't want to be judged, but it was, you know, a very nice gym, and it was, you know, it's a very nice gym that I go to, and it's, you know, I can do all the classes. I like the classes because like especially the ones that I do where the sort of like there's one where you do like 3 minutes on a punch bag, 3 minutes on weights, 3 minutes on a treadmill, and it's like that sort of concept. And would you be opposed to joining, I'm not going to name any names, but any budget gyms, like, because I'd struggle with that, if I'm honest. And that's not me being like, it's just, you know, I am managing to go into like the gym area now at the gym I go to, but you prefer the classes because it's your piece of kit, almost, even though there is a few other people, but at the gym I go to, there's like they have wipes on each thing, so you can wipe down. They have like antibacterial wipes.
Price for that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Ollie, you've been amazingly generous with your time so far. I'm just very cautious that you're a busy man. Yeah, I mean, in terms of anything else that you'd like to bring to the table, or any final questions from Ryan, really?
For me personally, I guess it's just making sure our audience knows what to do, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who really resonate with what you've said. A few things that I've never heard anyone struggling before, that I'm sure people out there are going to be like, that's me, that's what I had. Like, if they are resonating with all those things you've mentioned around the OCD, around the intrusive thoughts, what is the first steps they should do right now in terms of making a positive change and trying to stop?
There's a book called Brain Lock that I recommend anybody who's got OCD reading, and the reason why I recommend it is because it's had a huge impact on my life, but it's also impacted so many other people's lives, especially younger people, if a parent can read it and support their child through the processes. Because one of the biggest difficulties with OCD is you wait for therapy through the NHS and you end up getting CBT, and CBT is a really good therapy and can be successful for people with OCD, but it's also proven to be quite dangerous for people with OCD. So what happens is CBT is almost treated as it treats the umbrella of like what falls under that anxiety disorder. So you've got OCD, PTSD, you've got some things like phobias. They all fall under this and sort of generalized anxiety disorder. They all fall under the same thing. But what happens is you're treated with that, even though that it's not really the right therapy. It can be quite damaging and dangerous for kids, depending on what sort of thoughts you're having. So, you know, for me, it's about finding the right therapist is one thing. Like, if you're going to get therapy, and make sure you're going down the ERP route, which is exposure response prevention, rather than going through the CBT route. But this book, Brain Lock, outlines ERP pretty much, and it's like, it's an absolute game changer. When I was in a real crisis, my parents reached out to, we were like, we need to find the best person, because I failed with therapy with the other people. It wasn't working. My journey wasn't always great, and that might have been down to me as well. Therapy is huge, a brilliant thing for most people, right? And the first therapist I spoke to, we found a guy he was in Italy, the first guy, and we rang him up, and he was like, have you ever read the book Brain Lock? You might not need therapy if you read this book. He said, this might be all you'll need. And we were like, he's fobbing us off. Like, why doesn't he just want to make, you know, he could have charged us like, what, 200 quid an hour, that's what he wanted for these sessions, because he was like the best of the best. Anyway, so we were just like, he's fobbing us off, let's find someone else. Found another guy who was in America, and the first thing he said to me when I got on the call, have you read Brain Lock? And I was like, they don't even know each other, these two. I was like, what is this book? Anyway, so I got it. And, you know, it's an absolute game changer. It teaches you like the principles of how, you know, to effectively like exposing the thought. So with CBT, sometimes you're almost sort of like forced to like be present, you know, like be there with the thought and sit with it. With the exposure response prevention, you're almost you're shifting the focus on the thought straight away. So like an example for me was like the way you'd manage it is like, if a thought came into my head, I'd expose it. It's just a thought, and then my response would be, you've got OCD. It's a clinical illness. You're not well. These aren't real. It's, you know. And then the prevention would be thinking about something like positive. So for me, it was running London Marathon. Like I used to, you know, I was on the London Marathon prior to COVID, and it kept on getting put back. It was hilarious when I ran the London Marathon, because when I ran it, I'd felt like I'd ran it like thousands of times, because that was my way of preventing going down the mile. I was like, why aren't I emotional like I've been when I'm thinking about it, when I'm doing it? Anyway, but yeah, that book's incredible. And early intervention's just vital. Like these kids right now, like I'm absolutely, I'll do all I can to try and change the system. Like, you know, I've got 2 kids who I'm sort of on the cusp of being ready to share the struggles that we face with them. One of them autistic and ADHD, one of them ADHD and suspected autistic. But you've got kids now who are like trying to fit into this neurotypical education system, which is just bad. It's old, it's dated, and they just, you know, they're not suited to it. And, you know, if the neurodivergent, there needs to be changes, but the school can't keep up with it, and it's impossible for them. Do you know what I mean? So it's important, you know, for, you know, if you do recognise anything in your children, you know, speak to somebody about it and get the help. You know, and CAMS is, like I said, you can be waiting your whole school life waiting for support. So if you can afford it, or you have, I don't know, a lot of companies offer, like, you know, support professionally for your whole family. Go down that route and try and get your child like looked at, because and look for these support groups, Hub of Hope and things like that, and try and get
Hub of Hope.
I honestly don't think you understand the magnitude of what you've just said, in terms of there'll be parents listening who maybe have the suspected thoughts for the kids, and they're waiting for the CAMS to essentially take hold of it when they're waiting. But for you to give them a resource to say, listen, check this book out. It's very, you know, it's going to be cheap. Check it out. That's a great place to start. Get that early intervention.
And if your kid's a teenager as well, like it's something that they'd understand. Like I offer some time to like mentoring kids, and I've got a young lad I'm talking through it, working through some stuff with at the minute, who I did a talk at down in Kent recently, and his sister came up to me and she said, "Can you help my brother?" And I was like, "Wow, I've got him, Anna." Do you know what I mean? Like this is what I mean. It's like she came up, it's like I recognise it in my brother. Like these little things, you can see how much it means to me. Like I feel very emotional even talking about it, but you know, I'm trying to help him through it, and you know, he'll understand that the outline of that book. It's not like, you know, through younger kids there's other forms and things you can do. Like if you want to reach out, I can send over some stuff. You know, it's not a problem. Just reach out. Run for your mind.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah, probably Run for Your Mind is the best place on Instagram. Run and number 4 your mind. Give me reach out, and if you need, you know, if you need anything, or you're worried about your child on the back of anything I've said, just drop me a message and I'll send you loads of resources over. That's not a problem. Yeah.
Ollie, I feel like you've got this amazing superpower. I feel like I've known you years.
Yeah, no, I do. It's nice. That's what it feels great. I do feel like I've known you forever.
I think your story though is so endearing, and like all you have to do is tell your story, and people can emotionally connect at some point along that timeline. Something you've been through. And I think you've been through it all basically. Like, there's no one who's been through more stuff than you have, and I think the work you do, mate, honestly, absolutely phenomenal. And to put yourself almost like in harm's way a little bit, because when you go and tell your story, you relive it, don't you? You relive that emotion, you relive that rawness. You see other people who are kind of struggling with what you were struggling with. And I can't imagine what that's like, having a career now where you are, like I said, in almost putting yourself in harm's way of bringing up these old thoughts and feelings, but in a way so that it helps the people. It stops the block. People. I mean, it's phenomenal work.
I appreciate it, honestly. Thank you. Really, and it's almost there's times where I'm like, this is tough when you're going through a slightly difficult period, but there's also times where it's a constant reminder of how far I've come. So it's always good to get to the end of it, but sometimes more difficult when you've got 6 talks in a row, you know.
5 talks today for 20 days.
After right after the end,
That'll give you your own answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, sure, it's bad.
No, just to thank you for your time, Ollie. I really appreciate it.
Honestly, it's really good. Thank you so much. I really love it.
Fantastic, mate. Thank you. Honestly,
appreciate it,
great.
Guys, thank you for joining us on the Fit Dads podcast. See you in the next one.
See you soon.